Possiamo? Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everyone. Please be seated so we can start our seminar. Please wear your headphones. Welcome and good morning, everyone. Dear colleagues, Honorable Minister of Defense, Honorable President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, ambassadors, distinguished speakers and guests, I welcome you here in Rome to this hall, Nuova Aula dei Gruppi, at the Chamber of Deputies. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Mediterranean and Middle East Special Group of the NATO-PA. And once again, Italy has the honor of hosting this important gathering, which brings together parliamentarians from NATO member countries and delegates from countries participating in our partnerships for global security and stability, including some candidate countries for NATO membership. The broad and high-level parliamentary representation from our partner countries is the real added value of today's seminar. Similar occasions, attended by a large and distinguished audience, fill us, the members of the NATO-PA, with pride. And it is because they reflect the work that we carry out with perseverance through intensive parliamentary diplomacy. Our aim is to tackle the challenges emerging on the global stage, whilst always remaining true to our values and bringing the Euro-Atlantic community closer to its neighboring partners. All this in order to forge alliances and synergies for peace and prosperity. We are, in fact, living through a challenging time. The international context is highly uncertain. We are seeing constant attacks on democracies, on the rule of law, and the rules of international law. Our economies are suffering from the instability triggered by conflicts and the breakdown of the multilateral system. Fear has once again come to define our present, leaving our people at the mercy of a future fraught with uncertainty. But we must not give in to fear. On NATO's eastern flank, the war has been claiming innocent lives for more than 4 years. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to the Ukrainian delegation, whilst on the southern flank, tensions are flaring up again in the Middle East, especially in the Gulf. In the Holy Land, despite the US brokered ceasefire, difficulties persist within a broader context that also includes Iran and its persistent and unacceptable nuclear threat. Following the terrible attacks of October 7th and the Israeli military response in the Gaza Strip, military operations have also extended to Lebanon, involving the UNIFIL mission, to which various NATO countries are contributing, including Italy. We must do everything in our power to prevent a further escalation of the conflict, and allow me to express our solidarity and support for the soldiers engaged in this peacekeeping mission. In this context, the GSM provides a platform for dialogue and cooperation for all of those who are willing to build peace. We must make NATO a bulwark of security, not only for its member countries, but for the entire community of nations within the enlarged Mediterranean region. We live in an interconnected world where our stability and security are unthinkable unless the stability and security of our neighbors are guaranteed. The Euro-Atlantic community is going through a critical phase in which the unity of the alliance is threatened by the regionalization of conflicts. Therefore, we must act against this fragmentation. We must understand that the challenges facing the Mediterranean do not only concern the countries that geographically belong to the Mare Nostrum, but they affect the entire Atlantic community, just as the challenges relating to the Arctic do not only concern the Scandinavian region, but all of us as well. NATO's agenda must define joint actions aimed at ensuring maritime security, at protecting strategic routes, at fighting against terrorism and transnational criminal networks, at defending us from hybrid threats that are more and more challenging, and at implementing a governance framework for artificial intelligence based on mutual cooperation and human values, which must remain at the very core. These are global challenges that require a collective effort. We must all work together, reconciling our interests and prioritizing areas of common ground. Our contribution, not only as members of the NATO-PA, but as members of a wider community, one that stretches from the Atlantic to the enlarged Mediterranean, must be firmly rooted in our values. Our values, which are above all based on the principles of democracy and freedom. The outcome of an escalation of the conflicts in Ukraine, in the Middle East and Sahel is unpredictable. It is therefore our duty to foster a climate of détente, promoting peace and justice amongst people. In this context, and looking ahead at the future, the Mediterranean region is the most challenging testbed for the renewal of our Atlantic Pact. Therefore, NATO's actions should no longer be viewed as efforts to defend a single part of the world against an opposing bloc, but must be embedded within a truly global framework, one that also encompasses the Indo-Pacific. We must establish channels of dialogue with our closest partners and together with them promote the values of peace, equality, freedom that have always shaped the Euro-Atlantic community, the values upon which we intend to build our relations within the wider Mediterranean region. Parliaments are a natural forum for building peace because they are the only institutions that are capable of encompassing the political, social, and generational pluralism upon which the future of our people must be built. We parliamentarians are called upon to take responsibility and serve our communities, not only within our nations, but also on the international stage, by building networks that can uphold democratic principles on a global scale as well. I am certain that the contributions we will hear during the first day of our GSM meeting will definitely enrich our work with valuable contributions and insights. And finally, I would like to thank the presidents of the two chambers of the Italian Parliament who both wholeheartedly support the work of our delegation. The president of the Chamber of Deputies, Lorenzo Fontana, is today unable to attend due to other institutional commitments, but will be present tomorrow morning for the opening of our proceedings to deliver a welcome address. And the president of the Senate, Ignazio La Russa, has sent us a message which I shall now read out. I'll now read the message by President La Russa. Mr. President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Honorable Marcos Perestello, dear Chair of the Italian Delegation, Honorable Lorenzo Cesa, dear Chair of the GSM, Honorable Calovini. With this letter, I extend to you and to all the parliamentarians and rapporteurs and speakers my greetings of the Senate and my personal greetings on the occasion of the meeting of the GSM of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, which is being held in Rome on the 30th anniversary of its establishment. Today's session will be attended by the Minister of Defense, Guido Crosetto, which I also greet. And At the same time, in an interconnected world, the one in which we live, in order to ensure peace and security, we must not limit our view. We must keep into account all the flanks of our alliance, and we must never forget the consequences of the Russian war in Ukraine. I'm thinking of all the lives lost, of the pain that those people are still experiencing after years of war. But our transatlantic community has a new awareness, the need to invest on our defense capacity in order to strengthen our deterrence and in order to preserve the highest value for our nations, that is peace. All of these issues will be addressed in the GSM, and I can only wish you every success in your work. I am convinced that the discussions over the next 2 days will further strengthen the relations between your countries. So once again, we would like to thank President La Russa for this letter. And I will now give the floor to the Honorable Gian Giacomo Calovini, the chair of the GSM, and he will read the message that we have received from the President of the Council of Ministers, Giorgia Meloni.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My dearest, I am happy to convey to you the greetings on the occasions of the 30th anniversary of the creation of the GSM group of the Nato-Pa, gathering in these days in Rome after 30 years of political dialogue amongst the partners of the Mediterranean and the Middle East. This is a heritage we must cherish, and we have to leverage it for the challenges of today. Today, uncertainty is the new normal, and this is why we need a holistic approach. We need to be able to face the challenges in their entirety, and we have to be able to anticipate them. This is the approach that Italy has chosen within the context of the NATO alliance. Italy has always supported the importance of the southern flank of NATO because it really believes that. Up until now, cooperation and security have been playing a marginal dialogue as opposed to other fora. But now they are tools for capacity building beyond the alliance borders. This is a very important contribution, but the situation has changed. Today's context asks us to go beyond. Today, external instability and threats are increasingly interconnected. We need to invest in partnerships with the Southern Partnership. This is not preemptive diplomacy. It is the quintessence of our own survival. We are following very closely the evolution of developments in the area, and we want to chip in. We have to integrate political dimension with security dimension. The two must go hand in hand. Energy security and infrastructure resilience are our top priorities. I decided to read this dossier personally, and I myself was present in Africa and in the Gulf to reinforce strategic partnerships, diversify sources of raw materials, and I also decided to reinforce partnerships in the southern flank to come up with new partnership architectures based on converging interests, including resilience and energy security. Italy will continue to do its part, just as it has always done, to make sure that the southern flank is given its rightful place. We know this is the only way we can build a long-term partnership that the alliance needs. Today's seminar is of the essence along this path. The GSM is not only a consultative forum, it is indeed a space where we build a strategic culture. Thank you very much, and I wish you a fruitful discussion.
I am now very pleased to give the floor to the Minister of Defense, Guido Crosetto, whom I thank once again, and this is not just a formal thank you, for being here with us. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Ministry of Defense for the great support it is providing us during this Parliament, and for the opportunity to visit the Navy headquarters at La Storta tomorrow afternoon, as well as the naval base of Civitavecchia on Wednesday. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Admiral Berruti Bergotto, Chief of the Naval Staff, who is here today, and to extend my greetings to all commanders and officials of the armed forces and law enforcement agencies gathered here. The Minister's participation in our proceedings is a tangible sign of the enrichment that can arise from the interaction between the governmental and the parliamentary spheres. These two pillars must engage in dialogue with a view to fruitfully cooperate and generate proposals and ideas for the benefit of the community. Afterwards, we will hear the welcome addresses from the Chair of the GSM, Gian Giacomo Calovini, and the President of the Nato-Pa, Marcos Perestrello. And finally, we will hear the report by the President of the Med-Or Foundation, Marco Minniti, whom I also thank. Minister, you have the floor.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to convey the greetings, my greetings to Javier Colomina, representative of the Secretary General of NATO. I would like to convey my greetings to you, Honorable Cesa, head of the Italian delegation to the NATO-Pa, the President of the NATO-Pa, President, Mr. Marcos Perestrello. Thank you very much for being here. I would like to thank the Chair of the GSM Group, Gian Giacomo Calovini, Secretary General of the NATO-Pa, Benedetta Berti, the President Minniti, and all of you, dear parliamentarians, for being here today. For us, it's an honor to have you here today. For me, what is even more crucial for the future of NATO is the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO. Even more important than meetings within government representatives. And why is that? Within the NATO-Pa, we build the future of NATO itself. Governments represent majority, while parliaments do not, by their very nature. And parliamentarians meeting here, representing both the majority and the opposition, sharing a common need to reinforce NATO, well, this provides us with a completely different perspective on the future, unlike meetings with governments representatives. It embarks on a holistic approach. It represents a commitment for governments, irrespective of majorities of the moment. And this is what we really need as NATO and as an Atlantic Assembly. We need to be certain of our future. We need to have a certain future irrespective of changes in governments and majorities. NATO is not a Rotary Club, is not an elite club. It is not even a place to cherish culture. This is about collective defense. This is a great alliance that was established to promote collective defense. And this is a forum where some countries commit to defend themselves by joining forces and pooling resources in case of need. This is why and how the NATO was set up in the first place in the aftermath of the Second World War. For decades, we've been witnessing NATO's growth, and we've been looking at her as a kind, as it had become something useless, like a squandering of resources, energy, and some kind of boredom. For decades, people have been starting to think that the NATO was a legacy of the past, something we had inherited from the Second World War, something maybe useless, very expensive and bureaucratic thing. But then there was a wake-up call over the last years, and we have come to realize that a fundamental part of our security and 100% of our deterrence, as a matter of fact, depend on NATO. There's one nation in the world only that could do away with NATO altogether. US, they could survive without NATO, but none of our countries were to survive without NATO if we were to withdraw from NATO. We all know that. Over the last years, we have come to realize that everyone had to chip in and play its part. We had gotten used not to doing so because we wanted to invest resources on other chapters for spending items that were more rewarding than defense. When it comes to spending on defense, they do not help us gathering votes. It is pensions, it is education that helps when it comes to voters. When it comes to defense, it kind of conjures up something negative, that is war, and this is why it is not successful to invest in defense. But then recent times have taught us that there can be no school, there can be no kindergarten, there can be no hospital without peace in the first place. In Ukraine, schools were shut down, hospitals were destroyed, there's no longer energy sources, and people have come to realize how pivotal security is for a nation. And the same can be said for other parts of the world. Even our countries, our friends in the Arab countries have come to realize that. One morning they got attacked from a neighbor they had not attacked. And this is why we have to do the same. We have come to realize that modern war has nothing to do with past war, because the rules were different. Now you wake up and you find a war on your doorstep just because a neighbor has decided that in order to increase its clout, it must increase its influence. And this can be said for Qatar and Kuwait, Oman and other countries. This is how they think I can increase chaos. This is how I can block the Strait of Hormuz. This is how households and Austrian citizens, Italian citizens, and in Canada, this is how we get war in our houses, even if it's perceived as being far away from us. Prices in gas and heating ramp up, and that war becomes our war as well. We are faced with such a challenging world. And this is why NATO is so important. This is why this alliance is so crucial. And the same can be said for the southern flank. Often, when we, countries from southern Europe, tend to talk about southern flank, and we still do so, we are looked at with some kind of people who are naive and people who talk about a problem that does not exist. And the same can be said when we mentioned the possibility of a Russian attack on Iran's attack on other countries. It is, the short term that matters. But in fact, we must be able to anticipate challenges. We must be able to manage problems because they turn into real challenges. And talking about southern flank today means acting in anticipation. As a matter of fact, you're in Rome now. Rome was one of the capital of one of the greatest empires in the world, and at the apex of its splendor. And many of the countries that are represented here today were part of the Roman Empire. At the apex of its splendor, it crumbled. The Roman Empire, with the iron fist of a handful of other populations, it collapsed in the blink of an eye. You might think of a Europe where people age, and by 2030, European citizens will approach 50 years of age as an average age. And in 2100, the African continent will have an average population with 17 years of age in terms of average age. And these people will be poor, they will be hungry. We could leave our kids and grandkids to manage the problem, or we can act in anticipation. As a matter of fact, we can start now to think of what will happen in Lebanon. In Lebanon, we have 1.5 million displaced people that will become people who will look at Europe to come and to feel more secure. In a time where United Nations decide to put a stop to missions we have been bringing about for centuries. Well, this is a time where our assembly, your proceedings can indeed pave the cultural way forward, the political way forward, because they bring together the whole political spectrum, and this is how we can build our common defense and security. This is the pillar upon which our governments will be able to act in the longer run. But this assembly plays a pivotal role because it allows us to rediscover why NATO is so fundamental, why dialogue between Western nations is so important. Let me be frank. We could also think of a new NATO, a NATO that is able to enlarge its borders and welcome other like-minded countries. It makes no sense to think of NATO as something gathering around the Atlantic Ocean. But now the world has changed, and maybe NATO has to change and to adapt to the future. If NATO is to protect its countries, then it must become stronger and bigger. It must reinforce its borders to include like-minded countries, countries who share our own defense values. We opened NATO. We opened our doors to Korea, to Japan, and to other like-minded countries, be them observer status or fully fledged members. We must be able to do away with the past and think of the future with renewed impetus. And the same can be said for Europe. When I think of European defense, I do not think of defense systems of individual European member countries. I think of continental defense. It is not just about European Euro member states, but it's also about the UK, the Balkans, Ukraine, Moldova, Norway. It is also about Turkey. That is to say, Europe as a continent, not as European Union. We must be able to be far-sighted and to think of a world that is more secure, where nations have a same path and can pool resources. You are the pillar of this defense. You are the bedrock of this future. And I am here not only out of respect for this assembly and for the Atlantic Alliance, but because I want to remind you of this responsibility. This is a role that goes beyond our individual responsibilities. We must be able to steer our nations towards a future, and you must be the beacon of this new path. You are the ones who must tell your nations and your parliaments that there is no future unless we join forces as free nations, unless we are able to found a new charter in order for us and our grandkids to have a better future. I am certain you will be successful in this endeavor. Thank you.
Ringrazio.
Let me thank once again Minister Crosetto for his address, which was enlightening as usual. Dear Minister Guido, I strongly agree with everything you've said. It's really the time we need to rethink NATO, especially this is true for us parliamentarians of the NATO-PA. We work within the NATO-PA and then we have to report to our national parliaments. And it's hard to talk about NATO, it's hard to talk about defense and security, but we need to be far-sighted, as you said. You've mentioned the demographic crisis in Europe and in Africa. We shall not just focus on the present, but think of the future. So the idea of enlarging NATO and including more partners is key, and it's what we are doing together with President Perestrello and other friends. We went to India, we went to Japan, we went to many different parts of the world, and we have here today representatives from Algeria, from Egypt, and so many other countries from the Gulf and beyond. We need to be strong. NATO is today a political and military organization And it's sometimes considered as an organization of rich countries only, but it is not true. We're constantly having bilateral meetings with many different countries from all around the world. This is our goal. We all want to be together to build an enlarged NATO. And it is only by doing so that we can ensure peace, despite everything that's happening all around the world, despite what China is doing, despite what India is doing in order to reinforce its defense system. So I think that President Perestrello, and together with Benedetta as well, this has to be our true goal, to open up our dialogue within the Assembly. And excuse me, I will now give the floor to the chair of the GSM, Giangiacomo Calovini. You have the floor.
Grazie Presidente, grazie Ministro.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, dear Minister. Signore e signori, ministri e colleghi, amici.
It is my honor to host here in Italy, my home, for the 30th annual seminar of the Mediterranean and Middle East Special Group of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. As we know, we stand at a crucial juncture in history. Our discussion over the next few days will center on NATO's southern neighbor, a region country and crossroads. The geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and North Africa has seen profound shift, characterized by conflict and instability, but also by an important potential for transformation and growth. In recent years, the action of state and non-state actors alike have reshaped our understanding of security and cooperation across regions. The transformation underway calls for a unified approach from NATO, the NATO Parliament Assembly, and our partner has here in the room. The seminar provides us a unique platform to engage with experts and leaders who will share insights on the multifaceted issues we face, from geopolitical trends and economic opportunities to the pressing security concerning Libya and the wider Sahel region. Let us take this opportunity to strengthen our partnership, improve political dialogue, and explore solutions that contribute to the peace and stability in this critical region. I encourage each of you to engage actively, share your perspective, and work in this important discussion. Thank you for your commitment to this vital work, and I look forward to our fruitful exchange in the days to come. Thanks.
Ringrazio il collega.
Thank you very much, my dear friend and colleague, Giangiacomo, for your timely speech and for all that you have done within the GSM group. Thank you very much. I was very happy when you were appointed as chair of the GSM group. This appointment is all the more important in this time, and I'm sure your contribution will be fundamental as we move forward. The enlarged Mediterranean is a global space that must serve as a pivot for rebalancing relations. It is in strategic areas such as these that we can sow the seeds of democracy and freedom, thereby restoring hope to the world. And I will now give the floor to the chair of the Parliamentary Assembly of the NATO-PA, Marcos Perestrello.
Distinguished guests, colleagues, dear friends, it is a great honor to open this GSM seminar here in this beautiful and eternal city of Rome. Let me start by expressing my gratitude to the Italian Parliament and the Italian delegation to the NATO-PA, especially to Lorenzo and Giangiacomo for their exceptional hospitality and for the active and engaged role they play in our Assembly. Italy has always been a cornerstone of our alliance, providing leadership and vision, particularly as we look toward our southern flank. It is only fitting that we gather here to mark an important milestone for this Assembly, the 30th anniversary of the Mediterranean and Middle East Special Group. This seminar reflects the importance our NATO Parliamentary Assembly places on security, stability, and parliamentary diplomacy in the southern neighborhood. For 3 decades, the GSM has been the bridge between the Euro-Atlantic community and our partners across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Our mission remains clear: to strengthen the transatlantic bond while investing in political dialogue and practical cooperation with our neighbors. Because we know that the security of NATO is inextricably linked to the stability of the South. Today, as we face a global landscape marked by volatility and unpredictability, that principle is more relevant than ever. We meet at a time of significant transformation. Our southern neighborhood, stretching from the Middle East to North Africa and into the Sahel, is navigating a period of intense transformation. Over the next 3 days, we will examine how global geopolitical shifts and strategic competition are reshaping these regional dynamics. We must be clear-eyed. Our security environment is no longer fragmented. The threats we faced are interconnected. Russia's war against Ukraine is not just a European crisis. It is a global one. It has a direct impact on NATO and its deterrence and defense posture. But its ripples of the war are felt in the wider Middle East and Africa, including through disrupt energy markets, food insecurity, and economic instability. This war has demonstrated the deep connection between NATO's eastern and southern flanks. Our agenda for this seminar is comprehensive. We will discuss threats and challenges, but also opportunities for cooperation, connectivity, and shared security. We will examine the increasing role of the Gulf region as a global hub for trade and energy connectivity, and the potential for continuing to strengthen our cooperation. We will also address the emerging challenges to maritime security and critical infrastructure along key strategic corridors, routes that are the lifeblood of our global economy. We will, of course, discuss Iran's destabilizing role and how its indiscriminate and unacceptable attacks have threatened NATO allies, our regional partners, as well as regional and global security. Furthermore, we must acknowledge the persistent and asymmetric threat of terrorism, which continues to endanger our citizens and provide a foothold for external malign actors. In these troubled times, the answer is not isolation, but deeper dialogue. The NATO Parliamentary Assembly remains a staunch advocate for NATO's 360-degree approach. This means strengthening our partnership with the Mediterranean Dialogue and the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative and fostering new engagements across Africa. We are here to listen, to learn, but also to lead. I encourage you to engage in these discussions with the frankness, respect, and constructive spirit that have characterized the GSM for 30 years. Let me again, and to close, thank our Italian hosts, our guest experts, and fellow parliamentarians from across our partner nations for your presence and your commitments. I look forward for our discussion. Thank you.
Microphone, please. Thank you very much, Marcos. You have pinpointed all the big challenges that NATO is now faced with. And I myself would like to reiterate your call on all partner countries to forge an even stronger dialogue with the goal of making sure that peace is achieved in the world. Thank you very much, President Perestrello, for what you do on an everyday basis. And thank you for being so focused on partnership issues. We've been visiting the Indo-Pacific on several occasions, and also African countries. So our hope is to forge an even stronger dialogue with the countries bordering the Mediterranean. I see many representatives of those countries here today. Thank you very much, President. Now, I would like to invite the President of the Medor Foundation, Marco Minniti, to present his report. He was a member of the Italian delegation to the Nato-Pa himself during the preceding parliamentary term. Marco Minniti has a very long-lasting political experience. He was also Ministry of the Interior, and he has always shown a keen ability to interpret international dynamics and has made a significant contribution to Italy's management of migration flows. Thank you very much, President Minniti, and over to you for your speech. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for the invitation. For me, this is truly an honor to be here today to speak to this audience. As you rightly said, Mr. Cesa, I was myself a member of this assembly many years ago, and at the time I dealt with enlargement of NATO, but it was a completely different world. As a matter of fact, today we live in the era of uncertainty, however complicated this term, this buzzword might seem. And this is not a culture assumption, but a structural fact. As a matter of fact, for a very long time in the future, the world will be accompanied by a radical uncertainty. Radical uncertainty and a world that is ravaged by fractures and rifts. And this is unheard of. It has no precedence. As a matter of fact, we are witnessing the most challenging time since the end of the Second World War, and we have had difficult times before this one. But against this backdrop, the Mediterranean has a pivotal role to play. The Mediterranean has returned on the top of the Mediterranean agenda. This Mare Nostrum, for a long time, we've thought of it as a closed sea that had a marginal importance in the world balance. But as a matter of fact, it is pivotal to ensure the world's balance, and not because of vested interests of Europe and Africa and the Middle East, but the overall balance of the planet as a whole. Somehow, I would like to remind you of Fernand Braudel and his words. Fernand Braudel spoke about the central role of the Mediterranean. In this part, neck of the wood, we play three fundamental matches. One is more important than the other. First one, it has to do with the demographic imbalances. We have, on the one side, Europe that is aging and is losing citizens, and we're coining new synonyms for that. But the truth is, there are not enough children in Europe. On the one hand, on the other hand, Africa is in fact growing at the speed of light, and we must be able to govern these trends. But there's no doubt the humanitarian emergency can in fact be used as a tool. It can be instrumentalized as a weapon towards our countries and our dear democracies. Bear with me, before Russia's attack on Ukraine, there was a huge pressure by instrumentalizing the migration tool. Do you remember the woods of Bierowieza in Poland? Do you remember what happened back then? At the time, Europe stood up. And we know, despite that, that demographic imbalances and humanitarian crisis could be turned into could be weaponized, could be used as a tool, as a weapon in an unbalanced and asymmetrical war. And this is why we must forge a bigger pact, a pact between Europe and Africa. Legal channels for migration and fight against trafficking and smuggling in human beings. And for that, we need to do away with the traditional emergency, say, tools. This is a structural phenomenon. Number two, in the Mediterranean, we are faced with the race for raw materials, fossil fuels. And if you still had doubts, well, I invite you to watch the news to realize this. Critical raw materials are pivotal. We know that in the world of the future, raw materials will be very important. And in a key part of the Mediterranean, there are many of these resources. Number three, agriculture-related developments. We know that nowadays, the main area for potential development of new agricultural varieties is in Africa. If all arable land in Africa were to become, in fact, used, we could solve the food crisis for the whole world. And let us not mention renewable energies. When it comes to the Mediterranean, they are part and parcel of this part of the world, and so they have to be tapped into. Finally, world security. Nowadays, on the other flank of the Mediterranean, in the Sahel, we are witnessing the main incubator of international terrorism. And if you had doubts about that, let me tell you that Jenin, a terrorist organization, has been circling Bambakan nowadays. And we know way too well that here too, we are fighting a very sensitive battle, where there is international instability. International terrorism flourishes and thrives. Let us not forget that the Islamic State was defeated militarily, but it was not wiped out from the face of the earth. And let me add one more point. We should also look at what happens in Syria and Iraq, because when hotspots of foreign fighters are not properly managed, well, we have to be able to think of the future and to anticipate what could happen in those areas too. If this is true, then we must come to terms with one simple reality. If the Mediterranean is back on its rightful central place, the Atlantic Alliance must come to terms with this fact. The Atlantic Alliance is a political and military alliance. It was established as a consequence of relations between the two sides of the Atlantic. This is key, a key alliance. Nevertheless, it must find a new place in order to be able to act as a fundamental actor on the planet. And I embrace what you said on this. In this time, the NATO mission is not over yet, but it must be relaunched and reshaped. And let me conclude with these final points. Number one, we must come to terms with the fact that in order for NATO to be stronger, we need an autonomous European defense. And the two things can go hand in hand. They're not incompatible with one another. An autonomous European defense will make NATO and the European states stronger. I'm sorry if I am being blunt. And let me also remind you of something that was said at the end of the 90s by a U.S. Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, at the time. But just to tell you how that we're lagging behind on European defense. At the end of the 90s, Madeleine Albright reminded us that we needed something as a European defense. And Madeleine Albright at the time would say, there is no contradiction between NATO and European defense. We need to consider 3 Ds. fight against discrimination, fight against duplication and overlapping, and fight against decoupling. So, no discrimination, no duplication or overlapping, no separation or distinction. Those three elements are all the more timely nowadays. Let's leverage. Let's go back. Let's backtrack to these considerations, and let me conclude on this point. When I mentioned uncertainty, I told you that we will have to withstand uncertainty because the old world order is over. It will never come back. Nothing will be as it was before. This is not just a phase. This is the new world order that is here to stay. The traditional world order is over because war is being fought in the heart of Europe, and we have renewed hotspots in the Middle East. So we have to come to terms with a simple fact. However challenging the steps are when it comes to de-escalation or peace building, one thing is for sure. When an old world order is destroyed, where in an attempt to fight for peace, a de-escalation with Iran has to be based on a global vision of our planet. And this is why, if we are to come forward with a long-lasting peace in the world, then we have to speak clearly and bluntly. We need a new world order that must include the south of the world. Otherwise, it would be not viable. This is a message, and then there are no shortcuts on this. If we are to build a new world order with peace prospects for the world, then we must be able to forge a dialogue with the south of the world. And this is why NATO has to reach out to the south of the world. This is what I wanted to tell you, and this is why this is the only way we can bring about a better future for our communities. I'm sorry if I were blunt in my arguments, but there are times that require so. Sometimes we must do away with nuances and be blunt. By my own experience, I know how to tap into nuances, but now it was high time we invented a different approach, and we must be clearer now. And thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thank President Minniti for his excellent and very clear speech. He has called upon us to tackle great challenges. And I now invite our colleagues to ask their questions. I must say we do not have a lot of time. Maybe we have some questions from Albania, Finland, Greece. Okay, let's do 3 questions and then we'll resume later. Please ask short questions. So, our colleague from Albania. Thank you so much. I listened to your speech with great interest. So this is my question. When we speak of the Mediterranean, I would like to know what you think about the role of China, because I think that one thing is important to consider: NATO's engagement with China and the role of China. Well, thank you for your question, which is actually touching on a very important point. China must be at the core. It's a very important pillar. China, at the moment, is responding in a way to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. In 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, China was fearing a unipolar world would be created. And so a new slogan was created: hiding your capabilities and buying your time. this was not just the slogan of a party, but the whole spirit of a people was encompassed in this slogan. China sometimes hides its capacities, and it's buying its time. Let's just think of what's happening at the moment. We thought that the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz would lead to a collapse of Chinese export. And we thought that the Chinese economy would be in great difficulty, but the figures are saying something different. Chinese export has grown by 14.5%. This is public data. This is no secret. And just to be clear, yes, China is hiding its capacity and it's waiting for the good time to act. And the time to act is called Taiwan. And one thing we cannot afford is make it easier for China to win over Taiwan. Because in this uncertain scenario, China thinks that taking Taiwan will be a piece of cake. And that's why NATO must engage with the south of the world, with the southern flank. I deeply respect China, and I do not think that the south of the world should be left alone to only engage with China. Because China cannot be the representative of multilateralism at global level. Because if we let China represent multilateralism, well, we are in great troubles. And I had a chance of actually meeting with the Chinese leadership, so trust me on this. Thank you. Now a question from the Finnish delegation. Did you request the floor? Yes. And then we'll move on to Greece.
First, I would like to start with thanks and then one comment and a question. First, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Nato-Pa committees and colleagues for the visit they have made to Finland in recent weeks. Some of you have been able to experience the sauna and baptism in icy waters in ice-covered lakes. And I would like also express my gratitude for being able to participate in this meeting from far away from the northern flank. Just as you, the southern allies, keep NATO's southern borders secure, we in the north do the same. We implement NATO's 330-degree difference. If any security threat lands on the coast of Greece or Italy, it can travel to the borders of the Nordic countries within 24 hours, and the same in reverse. Let's understand each other well also in the future, just as Lorenzo Cesa mentioned in his opening remarks. No European country can isolate itself or imagine that security is responsibility of another country. We all are responsible for it, both here in the south and up there in the north. Thank you in advance to the Italian delegation for hosting us here in beautiful Rome, and looking forward to discussions ahead to learn more. But my question is about Africa. What do you think, what countries are ready to accept those democratic values which we have in Europe and would be able to join European countries, join NATO, join the organizations which we have? What would be the countries from Africa which would be able to do that already with democratic values? Thank you.
Grazie, facciamo una domanda.
One more question from the head of the Greece delegation.
Yeah, used to be head, no more. First of all, thank you very much for the wonderful hospitality, Lorenzo. I have a question for you. I don't understand how you can work in this city surrounded by all this beauty. The temptation is great for me to abandon the meeting and just start wandering around downtown Rome. And as for you, Mr. Minister Minniti, you should be very proud of your successors in the Parliamentary Assembly. The Italian delegation has been very active and always at the forefront of the debates under the leadership of Lorenzo Cesa. Now, two questions very, very briefly. One is about Africa. It seems to me that Europe is afraid of Africa and sees Africa as an immigration threat rather than as a place to engage. We have abandoned it to Russia, to Turkey, to China, to other, and EU has a very defensive posture vis-à-vis Africa. I wonder how this squares in with your thinking. And the second, as optimistic as I want to be and to think forward, I cannot, coming from Greece, wonder if we have this kind of trouble between Greece and Turkey on delineating our sea zones in the Mediterranean. And we have done it very peacefully with Italy, Greece and Italy. We wish we can do it with Turkey as well, but so far it has not worked. I wonder how optimistic we can be about Mediterranean as a sea of peace rather than of competition, geostrategic competition as we see it today. Thank you.
Grazie. Prima di dare le risposte, volevo salutare.
Thank you. Before the replies, I would like to extend my greetings to Elisabetta Gardini, Chair of the Italian Delegation to the Council of Europe. Now over to you, Minister. Thank you for your very interesting questions. Here in Rome, we are used to working against this backdrop. We are used to temptations, but as a matter of fact, we've been struggling with this for centuries, and Athens has nothing to envy to Rome in this respect. So, as a matter of fact, there is a piece of history that binds us together. Let me give you one example. When we mentioned the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, many were surprised to know that by blocking Hormuz, then the world economy would collapse, at least a piece of that, because they would somehow forget the ancient history and Greek history, as a matter of fact. As you know, at the end of the Peloponnese War, Sparta, in order to defeat Athens, they would block the Dardanelles Strait many centuries before Christ. And I thought, even in modern times, we got the news. Well, as a matter of fact, we got stuck in the past that the news didn't go through. But as a matter of fact, and to go back to your questions, thank you so very much for underlying how important relations with the south of the world is, and with northern European countries too. Finland is pivotal, as a matter of fact. Together, we have to come to terms with the fact that there is a fil rouge in that. When it comes to the war in Ukraine, and the Mediterranean and Africa, it is all interconnected. You know, the wheat corridors are just one example of this rationale. If we hadn't had those corridors back then, we would have faced a very important food crisis. And then Russia's being present in so many countries such as Mali, and it's failing in that country. It is also present in Central Africa. So it has a clout in Africa. And why is that? Because Russia is trying to affirm his hegemony vis-a-vis Europe. Do we have countries that are ready to face the challenges? Not yet, but there are countries such as Nigeria and other African countries that are facing tremendous security challenges, and the same can be said for Northern African countries. Our opinions might be diverging. We have different histories, but despite this, our Northern African partners are the main interlocutors of the European Union, and this is why they are here today, and I thank you for being here today. I think our dialogue must become part of our everyday endeavor. If Europe managed to reduce dependency on energy and gas in Russia, it was thanks to its relations with Africa, as a matter of fact. Was it not for Africa, Europe, the European Union would have never been able to break free from energy sources, from Russian sources of energy. Now, a last word on Africa. Europe is lagging behind. Europe must understand that the African country is not an issue, is not a problem, but a window of opportunity. And this is true both from the point of view of governance of migration flows and other points of view. The truth is we need young labor, trained labor. I mentioned Kenya earlier in my speech. Kenya is one of the countries with the highest training capacities for young people that can come to Europe and add value to Europe. Let me tell you one thing. Part of this new generations were, hired, were misled by Russia and then when sent to fight to Ukraine. There are citizens of Kenya that are fighting in Ukraine because that was the only way to do away with their hardship, you see. And the same can be said for critical raw materials. If China was able to withstand tariffs imposed by Trump, if China can be positive in awaiting the visit of President Trump next Thursday, well, this is due to the fact that China holds a world monopoly on critical materials and rare earths. And it is in this position because it is autonomous in terms of production and because it has a privileged relations with Africa. Thirdly, security. We cannot coexist with terrorism coexisting a handful of kilometers away from our coasts. We have learned on our own skins what it means to suffer attacks on our own capitals in 2013 and 2014 and so on and so forth. It is not centuries ago, it is a handful of years ago. Those threats could materialize again here in our homelands. There are radical fringes who think they can kill in the name of God just a handful of kilometers away from home, and this is unacceptable. We need to avoid invoking the name of God when we think about war and when we talk about war. So let's avoid invoking God when speaking of war, please. Thank you so very much, President Minniti. I would conclude this session here. We'll take a short coffee break here. There's a buffet awaiting you. Thank you so very much, President Minniti, for your eye-opening speech. And let's resume at 5 to 12. So just a handful of minutes, and then we will resume with session number 2. Session number 1, I beg your pardon. I'll see you in a while.
Okay.